Hi, welcome to SBR Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. It's the Monday after Week 13 in the NFL. We're doing a regular call with professional sports bettor Ted Savransky, a.k.a. Teddy Covers. We're going to find out a little bit what he learned from the on-field results on the Sunday games, Week 13. Ted Savransky, the first thing I think we have to learn is that, maybe the Pats are an auto fade going forward. Second straight up loss. I had a 50-50 day on Sunday, but Philly was one of my big winners there. And I'll tell you what, I jumped immediately on Houston plus 3.5 again on the opening lines for next week. And I'm thinking, until, they start to get healthier, Pat's got to be an auto fade, right? Too many injuries.
Well, I've had a great NFL season. I had a miserable day yesterday, so you beat the hell out of me. Congrats on going out of there 50-50. And one of my losers was New England. I thought the spot was absolutely right for the Patriots to bounce back, and I thought that Philly was going to have a hard time defending New England,
right.
which they did.
I think that's the point. It was a great spot for the Pats. It's just like too many injuries trumps everything when you hit a certain level, right?
Agree wholeheartedly. Yeah. That being said, New England's, in theory, going to get healthier this week. There's talk that Gronkowski could go on Sunday. And for everything that happened in the Pats-Eagles game, Philly scored 21 points when they weren't on offense. The two special teams touchdowns and the defensive score. And a 100-yard pick six goes a long, long way towards predicting point spread success. And, of course, there were 3 non-offensive touchdowns for the Eagles against New England in that game. That is not something I expect to be an ongoing problem for the Patriots. So, and New England's not a team that I don't look at New England as being an auto fade moving forward, especially if the money comes on Houston. The Pats aren't primed to go on a losing streak here, and I don't blame you for locking in on Houston at plus 3.5 early. Right. I'm not convinced that line's going to be there forever.
Yeah, I definitely when I made that bet, I was like, I might hedge out of this later based on injury issue reports and who's in, who's out. But it was just something I felt like was the right thing to do there. Then just so anyone doesn't think I'm only bragging about the winners and ignoring the losers, I had a huge winner with Philly, huge loser with Oakland, and the Chiefs. Right, they are rolling. Right, they've now won and covered 6 in a row. And their offense is putting up 30-plus points a game. Their defense is excellent. How long does this last? Looking at their schedule going forward, it's a pretty easy assignment, pretty easy bunch of games they have coming up, although they will be a big favorite in all of them. They're a 10-point home favorite this week to open against the Chargers. The Chiefs rolling, very impressive. How long does this last?
And that's, let's say it's already lasted 6 weeks. And when you get a team on a 6-week straight up an ATS winning streak, those don't go on indefinitely. And the prices that you've been asked to lay with Kansas City during this run, pick'ems, -2s, -3s, now all of a sudden we're seeing them as 10-point chalk against San Diego next week. So it's been a great run for those of you who've been backing Kansas City. But I would, if trying to project their last 4 games, hard for me to look at KC as a team that's likely to go 3-1/4-0 ATS, not considering the market support that they've generated throughout this current run. KC was a great team to back for the last month. I'm not convinced that'll be the case moving forward.
And they're going to be a big favorite in all of those games. And then let's talk about the Vikings, right? They got blown out for the second time in 3 games. The Vikings were awesome and a great bet for the first 2 sections of the season, but maybe going forward now, the Vikings are an auto fade. What do you think? What's your read on the Vikings? Anything we can learn from that blowout loss to Seattle?
Well, I had a big play on Minnesota yesterday, and it set up so many different ways right for Minnesota in that game. And, of course, let's not forget, the sharps were all over Seattle. The squares were all over Seattle. The books took an absolute beating on that game. I might have been the only one with a Vikings ticket. It was over very, very early. It was a very, very disappointing result for me. But, Minnesota now has injuries all over their defense. Yesterday in game, they came in missing one of their best defensive linemen. They lost their best linebacker and their best member of the secondary as that game went on. So they're missing their best player on all 3 defensive units. But more than anything, when it comes to Minnesota yesterday, was the way they responded to adversity, which is tuck tail and hide. The tail went right between their legs as soon as things went south, and it never got any better. And for a team that hasn't been able to step up in class at any point this year, the fact that when they were punched, they couldn't punch back is a major concern. And when you look at all the point spread success that Minnesota had over the first 2 months of the campaign, well, maybe they're a team like Atlanta right now that is just likely to be an overvalued commodity for some time moving forward. As for me, again, when I have a big bet on a team and they do the exact opposite of what I expect, I don't want a knee jerk. I don't want to auto fade the Vikings. They're a team that I put into the I do not have a good read on category, as opposed to a team that I'm like, I got to fade this squad right away. But I'll tell you what, if you like Arizona and Thursday night, I would bet them sooner, not later. I think the markets are about to crash on Minnesota. And Arizona's likely to take money in that game.
Right. All right, and then you mentioned the Falcons. And my next question for you is talk about always a fun topic, terrible teams. At the end of the year, we got a group of teams. Maybe some of them will be good auto fades. Maybe some of them will actually rally and be actually good big underdogs at the end of the season. We do see that a lot. The first one I want to ask you about, the first one in the group is Miami. Of course, they won, but they lost ATS. They've now lost 5 out of their last 6. The win was a little fluky. Miami just looking like a team that is a team you either want to bet against or pass on going forward. Then we have the Browns and the Rams. Absolutely just sad, pathetic excuses for football teams offensively. And then we have the Falcons, not a terrible team, but they've now lost, I think it's 8 in a row against the spread. An interesting group of teams there, Miami, Browns, Rams, Falcons. Any of those teams strike you as teams that will continue to be good ATS fades, or maybe turn the corner and start to become a good bet in the last part of the season?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, Atlanta, their last cover came in week 4.
Yeah.
So it's been a while. And of course, the Falcons are one of these teams. If you looked at the last 6 games, if the last 6 games came first, and we were looking at this team as being one of the worst in the NFL, and the markets haven't obviously appreciated that necessarily. But at this stage of the season, you have to say that Atlanta is fairly valued. Mm-hmm. As for Cleveland, they're probably going to put Johnny Football back behind center this week, and I think he'll be an upgrade over Austin Davis. Right. But, you have a team that's 2-10, where the coach is likely to be fired, where the GM is likely to be fired, where there's going to be another transitional offseason. These are not the type of teams that I try to make money with in the NFL in December. They're really not. You talked about what were the other 2 teams that you mentioned?
Sorry. Then there's the Rams, inept offensively, then Miami, a team that just looks like there were high hopes from the beginning of the season. Then the coaching change happened. People thought maybe it was the coach that was the problem. Now it's pretty clearly looking like it's the team that's the problem.
Yeah, and it's all of the above for Miami. Right. But when you have these late season situations, like we're seeing in Cleveland, like we're seeing in St. Louis, like we're seeing in Miami, okay, where it's not just the end of a bad season, it's probably the end of an era. The Dolphins are going to have a new coach next year. They're going to have a new GM next year. They're probably going to move in a different direction at quarterback next year. We would expect significant roster upheaval this coming offseason. What happens when we expect that? Well, you don't necessarily expect great efforts down the stretch. Same story in St. Louis. Jeff Fisher can't possibly hold on to his job this time.
Right.
The guy hasn't coached a winning team in his last 6 years as an NFL head coach. And, by the way, the last coach to keep his job after 4 consecutive non-winning seasons in the NFL was Jeff Fisher at Tennessee from 95 to 98. So it doesn't happen very often. You have to think he's going to be gone. But when you look at all of these teams, Cleveland and St. Louis in particular, there's no quarterback play. There's nothing to like for the quarterback position. And when you have that type of situation, it's hard to recommend a bet on for a squad that isn't rallying for anything, isn't playing well. Nobody's going to be there next year, and they have no quarterback. So I guess of the group, Tannehill's probably the best QB, but I'll tell you right now, I'll be looking at the Giants next Monday night. I think they're going to be the right side in that game. That's
exactly what I was going to say. That was another bet that I locked in on the openers, the Giants +1. I did take a shot on that one as well. All right, Teddy Covers, is there anything that we didn't get to from NFL Week 13 you think is worth noting?
Well, I want to talk about the New York Football Giants and the Chicago Bears, who were 2 other teams that were kind of fringe playoff contenders that came up short in Week 13, and both those teams, in my mind, the classic knee-jerk reaction is, "Oh my God, they lost a must-win game, therefore they're auto fade down the stretch." Mm-hmm. I would think that Chicago is live and the Giants are live moving forward. And the fact that both lost, tough OT games in Week 13 does not make them auto fades moving forward. The post-game comments from both squads, in my mind, were fairly positive And I think that there may well be money made on Chicago and New York down the stretch of the NFL campaign.
As of Monday night, I'm completely agreeing with you on the Giants, at least this upcoming week against Miami. Teddy Covers, interesting thoughts as always. Thanks so much. Talk to you again with our recap for Week 14 next Monday.